Some people command a room with volume, others with silence, but every so often it's the quietest voice that ends up saving everyone. Her name was Valerie Dean, and if you asked most people at St. Elora General what they thought of her, you'd hear the same thing. Sweet lady, real steady, been here forever. They didn't say brilliant, they didn't say essential, they just said steady, like furniture. She was a nurse, registered, board certified, 32 years in, 4 pandemics, 6 hospital directors, too many mistakes made by people with more letters behind their names. But they didn't ask Valerie for her opinion much anymore, especially not the new batch of young doctors, especially not Dr. Carson, 31, Ivy League white coat with a god complex to match. He ran the ER like a tech startup, fast, loud, no time for questions, especially not from nurses. That Friday night was already chaos, 3 car accidents, a stabbing, 2 heart attacks. And that was before the child came in, 7 years old, burning up, nonverbal. His mother barely coherent from exhaustion and fear. Valerie noticed his pupils first, uneven, then his vitals, high heart rate, shallow breaths, oxygen falling, not flu, not a seizure, something else. She flagged Dr. Carson gently. Could be neurological. I'd test for... But he was already walking away. Thank you, Nurse Dean, I've got it from here. She said nothing, just nodded, as she always did. Walked back to the nurse's station, quietly made a note, and moved on to the next patient. She'd learned over time, you can't make people listen, but you can remember everything they missed. By 1:30 a.m., there were 4 more cases, different patients, same odd symptoms, fever, disorientation, agitation. One even tried to bite a nurse. Valerie noticed it all, didn't panic, didn't escalate. She just started building a mental map. Behind her, Jordan, a first-year intern, watched her work like a shadow. He'd been assigned to her for the week, said almost nothing, but noticed everything. How come nobody listens to you? He asked, barely above a whisper. Valerie smiled. Because I don't make them feel important. He blinked. But you're the one actually keeping this place together? She handed him a chart. You want to learn how to be a good doctor? Watch the nurses, watch the janitors. They see everything first. At 2:12 a.m., the power flickered. Just for a second, but enough to make the heart monitors beep. Valerie's eyes tracked upward, then to the hall. The child from earlier was missing. Code purple. Security scrambled, everyone on alert. They found him curled up in a linen closet, shivering and mumbling nonsense. Dr. Carson barked orders. Sedate him if necessary. We can't have him running around. This is a liability. Valerie stepped in, quiet but firm. He's not dangerous. He's terrified, and something's spreading through this hospital. He turned to her, impatient. Are you diagnosing now, Nurse Dean? She looked him straight in the eyes. Number I'm watching. He said nothing, just turned away again. But the intern, he stayed close. Watched how Valerie began adjusting things under the radar, switching bed placements, whispering to other nurses, logging symptoms that hadn't yet been officially documented. By 3 a.m., 5 nurses had called out sick mid-shift. Valerie noted the timing, checked the air vents, made a list, cross-referenced patient logs. And she remembered something from back in 2009. A heat wave, a ventilation issue, and a case of bacterial meningitis that had almost shut down the old wing. No one else remembered that. They weren't here. But she was. By sunrise, no alarms had gone off. No officials had been called. And still, Valerie watched. It was just another night in the ER, but something was coming. Something only she saw coming. And the real code hadn't been called yet. By 6:12 a.m., the pediatric wing had 3 children with identical symptoms. One was now intubated, another was seizing, and still, no one was connecting the dots. Dr. Carson said it was a coincidence. Seasonal bug, kids crash faster, that's all. Valerie didn't argue, she just kept watching. She reviewed every intake sheet from the past 6 hours, every room assignment, every nurse rotation. She noticed something no one else had. All 5 patients had come in contact with the same orderly, a transfer from another hospital, temporary hire. No one had logged his previous assignments. He was gone now, sent home feeling under the weather. No protective gear, no isolation, just a clipboard and a handshake. That's when it clicked. Valerie pulled up an old hospital memo from 3 years ago, a report from a medical conference she'd never attended, but read front to back. Rare virus, short incubation, airborne under certain conditions. Had never made the news, but it had happened. And now it was happening again. She walked calmly into the admin office, presented her findings to the hospital's assistant director. He barely looked up from his screen. "Valerie, you're not authorized to make diagnostic conclusions." "I'm not. I'm making observations." He sighed. "Leave this to infection control. They'll review it on Monday." "It's Thursday." Silence. "I'll make a note," he said, finally. She walked out without a word, but inside something shifted. She didn't sleep after her shift ended, didn't go home. Instead, she made a list. Reassign vulnerable patients away from shared air ducts. Alert the janitorial supervisor. Ask him to temporarily disable automatic fans on low floors. Speak to nurses quietly. Share signs to watch for. Tell them not to panic, but to mask up, even off the clock. Contact a friend in maintenance. Ask if any ventilation work had been done recently. It had, 4 days ago, on the pediatric floor. The hospital hadn't issued a single warning. No one had made the call, because no one with a title had put their name on it. But Valerie didn't need a title. She needed to keep people breathing. By midday, the ER had 4 staff members calling in sick. Nurses, 1 receptionist, a lab technician. Carson was in the break room, running on 2 hours of sleep and too much caffeine. He looked at Valerie like he finally saw her, not as background noise, but as a steady presence in the eye of a storm. "You think this is serious?" he asked, quieter now. Valerie didn't flinch. "I think it's already here." He blinked, then laughed nervously. "You've been in this place too long. You're seeing ghosts." She didn't respond, but Jordan, the intern, did. "She's right. I've been tracking it too. Everything lines up." Carson frowned. "Since when do interns track contagion patterns?" Jordan shrugged. "Since I started following the smartest person on this floor." Carson looked between the two of them. For a moment, just a flicker, he considered listening, then shook his head. "If you're wrong, it causes panic. Lawsuits. If you're right, it's already too late." Valerie looked at him and said the simplest thing. Doing nothing won't save you either way. By 3 p.m., the crash cart was rolled out for a nurse who collapsed in radiology. Code blue, CPR, no pulse. She came back after 4 minutes, but the whole floor changed. Now it was real. Now people were scared. Valerie stayed calm. She didn't raise her voice, didn't panic. She walked into the break room and handed out N95s she'd stored in her locker after the last flu season. Asked the nurses to triple clean contact surfaces, started an unofficial rotation list to limit exposure. She rerouted food trays through a single, cleaned corridor, called in a favor from an old friend in emergency services, had him place a soft call to the city's public health liaison. No panic, just a flag. Then she went to the pediatric wing. She found the child, the first one, still intubated, fever now down. His mother looked up at her, eyes swollen with exhaustion. "No one told me what's wrong," she whispered. Valerie knelt down. "I'm still figuring it out, but I am figuring it out." The woman nodded slowly, gripped her hand like it was the only stable thing in the world. That night, the ER was a different place, still loud, still messy. But beneath it, a subtle shift. People had started looking to Valerie. They asked her opinion, asked her where supplies were, what the symptoms meant, what she thought. and without a badge or a pager or a name on the door, she began to lead. Because when the system didn't move fast enough, when the people in charge didn't listen, she did what she always did. She watched, she remembered, and she acted. By the time the next morning came, it would be too late to pretend it was all normal, and the truth would force its way out. But Valerie Dean was already ahead of it, because while everyone else was waiting for the code to be called, she was already answering it. By the time the third nurse collapsed, there was no more denying it. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't stress. This was spreading. The ER felt different now, like holding your breath underwater, waiting for the panic to start. Phones were ringing off the hook. Patients were packed in double. People were whispering words like quarantine and exposure, but no one was saying it out loud. And still, no official memo, no alert, no leadership. But Valerie, she was already moving. She found a small office with a dusty whiteboard and started logging patient names, handwritten room numbers, symptoms, time of onset. Nurses came in quietly, added names, drew lines. Without being told, they started following her system. She had already reassigned rooms, splitting floors by symptom clusters, unplugged vents in the worst rooms, and told the janitors to wipe every doorknob with bleach, not standard spray. The infection control team still hadn't responded. The hospital director, out of town, and Dr. Carson, he was trying to hold it together, but it was falling apart in his hands. At 10:37 a.m., a 12-year-old girl went into cardiac arrest in the waiting room. Her mother screamed so loud the whole ER stopped. They didn't have a bed, didn't have an open crash bay. Valerie grabbed the defibrillator and dropped to the floor. No hesitation, no second opinion. 1, 2, 3, clear! The girl jolted, still no pulse. Valerie leaned in closer. Not yet, we're not losing her. Again, clear. Pulse, faint, alive. By the time the team got her upstairs, people weren't asking who gave the orders anymore. They were following Valerie. In the break room, Dr. Carson sat with his head in his hands. The intern, Jordan, stood in the doorway. Hey, Doc, you okay? He looked up, eyes bloodshot. Defeated. I didn't listen. She told me something was off and I blew her off. If this gets traced back to that patient transfer, Jordan cut him off. Then own it. But don't pretend you were alone in this. Carson looked confused. Jordan continued, voice steady. She's been managing this place all night while you were chasing protocols. You want to make it right? Step back. Let her lead. That hit him like cold water. And for the first time in his career, he did exactly that. At 12:04 p.m., the call came in. A lab confirmation from the public health department. They'd cross-checked the names Valerie had flagged. 3 were part of a cluster tied to a rare, mutated respiratory virus first identified overseas. Transferred patient was a carrier, no symptoms, no alert from the originating hospital. Valerie had been right the whole time. The entire pediatric wing was exposed. 3 staff members were now considered high risk, and the hospital was already a day late, but not because of her, because they hadn't listened. An emergency meeting was called in the upstairs boardroom. Valerie wasn't invited, but she walked in anyway. She laid the patient map on the table, explained how she'd already rerouted rooms, explained how she'd started the first steps of soft quarantine, explained how many people were still walking around with no idea they'd been exposed. No one said a word. She ended with one line. If I hadn't acted, we'd be calling morgues instead of mothers. Silence. Then one of the senior physicians finally spoke. What made you so sure? Valerie looked at him. I wasn't sure. I was watching. While the rest of you were waiting for paperwork, I was watching. That night, the hospital issued a public statement. No details, just a precautionary temporary lockdown to address a potential exposure. Inside, nurses taped handwritten signs on supply closets. Valerie protocol, use gloves plus goggles. Ask Val before moving patients. No one made it official, but everyone followed it. And in a moment that felt almost surreal, Dr. Carson stood in front of the full ER staff and said, "We owe the last 24 hours to one person. She saw what the rest of us didn't. She acted when no one else would, and she didn't need authority, just courage." He turned toward her. Valerie Dean saved this hospital. She didn't cry, didn't smile wide, she just nodded. Once, because she wasn't there for applause. She was there to keep people alive. That's what nurses do. And when the system forgets that, sometimes it takes a crisis to remember. 3 days later, the hospital reopened its ER doors. The virus had been contained. No fatalities beyond the initial scare. Valerie's early action had prevented what could have been a disaster. But there were no headlines, no ceremonies, just a shift in the way people looked at her. And sometimes that's louder than any award. The intern, Jordan, found her in the staff lounge folding scrubs. "They're asking me to write a paper on the response protocol," he said. "Said it was one of the most effective unofficial interventions they've seen." Valerie didn't look up. "Make sure you spell everyone's name right," she said. He paused. "I want to name it after you." She stopped folding, then turned and smiled. "No, you don't." "Why not?" "Because if they need my name on it to believe it worked, then they still haven't learned." Later that afternoon, hospital administration asked her to step into a leadership advisory role. She politely declined. "I don't need a new title," she said. "I just need you to listen to the one I already have." And that was it. No spotlight, no viral video, no special plaque in the hallway. But for the first time in a long time, Valerie walked the floors and people moved with her, not around her. She said less, and they listened more. On her next overnight shift, a young nurse asked how she stayed so calm through it all. Valerie sipped her coffee and thought for a moment. "Because I knew the storm was coming," she said. "And I've been the umbrella for so long, I don't even notice the rain anymore." A week later, she passed the same break room where Dr. Carson now ran every intake sheet by 2 nurses before signing off, where interns sat in silence when Valerie spoke, where custodians were included in morning briefings for the first time in ever, and she smiled just slightly. Not because the system was fixed, but because someone finally saw how broken it had been all along. She didn't change the world that night. She didn't need to. She just reminded one corner of it that quiet doesn't mean small, that support staff doesn't mean background, and that wisdom doesn't always wear a white coat. Sometimes it walks softly, listens carefully, moves without fanfare, and saves lives anyway. Some people command a room with volume. Valerie Dean saved one with silence, and the next time a code gets called, they'll remember who was answering it before anyone else knew. It rang